And those of WOAI and iHeartMedia.
Welcome. This is Sidebar. Sidebar, a frank discussion on life, the law, and liberty. Sponsored by the LaHood Norton Law Group. And now, your objection sustained. Your hosts, Karen Klaus and former Bexar County District Attorney, Nico LaHood.
And I always start again with the same introduction, but I have to introduce Nico LaHood, former Bexar County DA, trial lawyer, managing partner of LaHood Norton Law Group, and George Araujo, former chemist and pharmaceutical researcher and director. And, I don't know if Nico knows, but I was gone out of town being a total slave to my dad and my daughters. It wasn't actually a vacation, and so I had been checked out, but before I left, of course, there was that little debate that made everybody just kind of, I don't know, say that maybe Joe should pass the torch. And I'm not sure. I asked you about it last week, George, and I was like, is it as easy as him saying, okay, I'm stepping down, or is there some process? And even though they're trying to cover their tracks and say, well, maybe he shouldn't, maybe everybody overreacted, I still feel like people are saying, get the heck out of the way.
Well, they are. I mean, so they said, get the hell out of the way.
Right.
And then they said, well, I guess we're stuck with him, so he was sick, he had a cold or whatever it was, he was jet lagged, which didn't make any sense. And now they're saying get the hell out of the way, it seems like, again. But it's just not that easy. I mean, it depends on each state's laws, what they have, and then you have the convention delegate process, and you have super delegates, and this is really complex. I mean, I was kind of trying to semi-dive into it last week to make sure that I could even articulate what the possibilities are. And it comes down to a handful of states, Wisconsin being, from my understanding, being the most significant one of those handful of states, that would be a problem for switching out the candidate. Then you have the convention, and then you have, then he has his delegates, and if he voluntarily steps down, he can pass them over to someone else, and then there's this kind of smoky room-filled environment where they decide, talk about not protecting democracy. I mean, the people in the Democrat primary have spoken, and they chose Joe Biden. Now, that's the issue to me.
That is the issue.
That's the issue. Talk about a threat to democracy. They've spoken on this issue. Now, of course, there's this narrow ability to switch out a candidate if there's unfortunately a death of a candidate, which has happened in the past. But this is not just, I think we screwed up. This guy's lost his marbles and we need to switch it out. It's just not that easy.
I hate it when you say that because it's so simple, but he kind of has lost his marbles, hasn't he?
I mean, I'm not trying to be disrespectful about it. We've all had a family member that is dealing with cognitive decline or dementia or on-stage Alzheimer's, early-stage Alzheimer's. But he's
the president,
talking about it. Everybody's talking about it. Even Sandhu Gupta, how you pronounce his name on CNN, everybody, whatever the hell. I mean, everybody is talking about it, that he needs to take a cognitive test. And look, that interview from last night with George,
I haven't watched that yet.
That 15-minute taped interview with George Stephanopoulos, or Snuffleupagus, whatever his name is.
Stephanopoulos.
Wasn't that from Sesame Street?
That was from Sesame Street.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, that didn't help him at all. Now, to credit to George, but he must have gotten the green light to press him a little bit, because he pressed more than I think that venue would have ever pressed him. But there's a lot of dynamics here. Obviously, the bottom line is the Democrat Party is in kind of a interesting situation, to say the least, with their candidate.
A pretty fair-minded columnist on Spectator.com by the name of Charles Lipson stated, I thought, really well. He says, Joe Biden helped himself only because after a really dreadful week, he didn't hurt himself. And he used the baseball analogy. He says there were no hits, there were no runs, and there were no errors. He says, but that's just not good enough right now, right? And so I thought that was a really good way to say it. But I think you hit the nail on the head, Nico, and you're, unbeknownst to you maybe, basically echoing the Federal Election Commission. There's really no way to reallocate those delegates. Not an easy way, and it would be long and messy. And then there's the question of money. So I've said from the very beginning, and maybe I'm still wrong. I don't think I am, and so I'll double down on it. I don't think Joe Biden's going anywhere. I don't. And by that, I mean the Biden-Harris ticket. Don't expect Gavin Newsom. Don't expect Gretchen Whitmer. Don't expect that. it's going to be a Biden-Harris ticket. Now, it's possible that Kamala Harris could rise to the top. God forbid, because I think she's worse than Joe Biden. If you put a gun to my head and
You
you
really
say,
do.
it's either Biden or Kamala, I would say it's Joe Biden. Kamala Harris is dangerous and she is reckless. And it's got nothing to do with the cackling and the clownery. It's just on matters of policy. We should talk a little bit about that because I do think that is a possibility. I don't think he's going anywhere. Last week we did a little Cliff's Notes on this idea of the 25th Amendment. There's no way that's going to work. It's way too complicated. It doesn't remove the president. At best, it temporarily transfers powers. Yeah. The Democrats don't want that. And Nico hit the nail on the head. How do those things get reassigned? And if it was anybody other than Biden and Harris, what about the $240 million in their war chest?
Yeah.
They can't reallocate that to people. So somebody would have to start all over.
I understand that Joe can allocate it to Kamala.
Oh, within the Biden-Harris ticket.
Okay, got it, yeah.
So within the Biden-Harris ticket, whatever, any combination thereof. But outside of that, good luck. I don't even know if there's a mechanism to do that.
There's so many different avenues and paths that we need to ask about. But one of the other things that happened this week in the news is the Supreme Court had a ruling on presidential immunity. And I know that this is very complicated, but I mean, it seems like this is something good for President Trump. I hope we get a chance to discuss that, too.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a big deal. I mean, there's absolute immunity, just Cliff Note version, absolute immunity for constitutional acts. There's presumptive immunity for official acts. And then there's a kind of a balancing test. You have to have a hearing, and a lower judge has to make a determination through a judicial proceeding of what's a official act and what's not an official act. Now, the dissent, and I don't know if you want to talk about it now, Karen, or whatever you want to talk about it. The dissent is hyperbolic. I mean, Sotomayor is just, he's going to use SEAL Team 6 and all this other crap. I mean, and then all the BS from the different outlets is really overblown. It's just read the opinion, understand what they're saying. This all they did was extend the civil protections that have always been in place. You can't sue a president for official acts. I mean, it makes sense. There was nothing unreasonable about this. It did not create a dictatorship. It didn't create a king, as whatever her name is, Rachel Maddow was trying to say. It's just too much. But again, you got to expect that. I mean, it's overblown. I mean, I think it was a practical. It was a practical. Now, one thing that Sotomayor was talking to Patrick, is if she was right. This is not a textual opinion, meaning there's nothing in the law that protects the immunity of the president, but it's a pragmatic. It's a practical opinion that it's something that needed to be done long before this, but it just never thought it was needed.
Yeah, interesting point. You'd never think you'd hear those words coming out of Sotomayor's mouth. I mean, that's an Antonin Scalia dissent. There's some. I wonder. I don't know if Antonin Scalia would have objected because he was such a hard textualist. Good question. But it's true, isn't it? It's not explicitly laid out in the Constitution, but it is reasonably inferred. Right. At least one would think so from the majority ruling, and certainly historical precedent. And Roberts even mentioned that. He basically said, never before has this issue come before the court. I wonder why. Well, we've never been so uncivil, to be honest. When was the last time a party tried to really, to use Sotomayor's word, try to off a political rival like we are now? I mean, that's really what brings these issues to the forefront of the court. I'd like to, Nico, to read the language that Roberts used, the clip, and also read the language that Sotomayor pushed back with, which Nico mentioned hyperbolic. It's bizarre.
I definitely want you to read it because I haven't read it myself. As we wrap up this segment, I wanted to also mention maybe if we could touch on why people get to go to the coast this weekend and why people are grilling hot dogs, because I think a lot of people forget what the 4th of July is all about. Am I mistaken? I mean, there's mattress sales and there's hot dogs and American flags everywhere, but that seems to be such a topic that it's so important, and we need to mention it because of what we face in this world today.
Well, I mean, it's would you say Happy Independence Day? we were fighting for independence from British control. And they were the powerhouse. They were the superpower at the time. And you think about this regulated militia group of, farmers and, 13 colonies. They were under their iron fist. And when you study the Constitution and the First, Second, Third, Fourth, Fifth Amendments, it's fascinating when you really understand taking yourself back in time, what they were dealing with back then. I mean, when you think about, and it wasn't just on 4th of July, it was over a series of days. They didn't have United Airlines where they say, meet on the 4th of July, we'll get there and we're all going to sign at the same time. I mean, it didn't happen. It was over a days, but they had to pick a day, and they picked 4th of July. That's fine. I mean, when you think about it, they were signing a document of treason. When you really think about that, this was a treasonous document. And when you think about the 4th of July, you think about skin in the game. You think about these guys, and many of these founding fathers had a lot to lose, and they were willing to lose it all because they felt it was appropriate. And I always joke with when I first studied this years ago, because I couldn't stand history when I was younger, and I can't get enough of it now. But you think of one of the signers, and it was John Hancock. And he signed the biggest. I mean, he wanted his name known, and that's why they say, "Hey, Karen, put your Johnny Hancock on this."
So amazing.
It's from that. It's from John Hancock actually signed the document, and he wrote it big. And so there's a lot when you study the history of the time. When you study the fact that this is an unbeatable nation by being resisted by a bunch of farmers and backroom colonists and all this other stuff. It's truly miraculous for them to have been successful, and then for us to have the country we have today. And that's why it's so important to preserve it, to preserve the rights that not only our founding fathers believed that we got from God. And we think about Isaiah 33:22 and that idea of this, the different branches of government, the 3 branches of government, are really a biblical idea. We can talk about that later whenever you want to. It's fascinating to me now that I'm older, and I really appreciate it.
And moving, they end the Declaration of Independence by saying straight up that they were going to pledge their lives, they were going to pledge their fortunes, and they were going to pledge their sacred honor. And people need to understand that that's exactly what happened. If you study history, you're going to see that 5 signers were captured by the British, and they were tortured until death. 12 had their homes ransacked and burned. 2 lost their sons in a Revolutionary War. Another had their sons captured. 9 of the 56 fought and died from wounds sustained in a Revolutionary War. This literally happened. And so the question is, what was so important to die for? And if we don't know the answer to that question, we're in deep trouble.
Well, at least Biden knew how to say ho, ho, ho at the 4th of July event that they had at the White House. We're going to talk about President Biden coming up right after this break. Video for this show, during the show and after the show, just go to sidebartv.com, and that's where you can find a platform of your choice. So President Biden facing an uprising from some of his party's own wealthy donors right now. I hear that, is it the Disney heiress that says she's not putting any money toward the Democratic Party until Biden steps down, and a lot of other people are saying, yeah, after that debate and a couple of other things, we're not putting any more money towards this campaign. So what happens? I know that this is such a complicated question, and just you guys answering one by one about all of the steps that need to be taken. Can it really happen? Can it happen?
Is it possible? Sure, it's possible. Is it probable? It's not probable. I think George's point earlier is it's more probable that Kamala Harris will be the nominee than switching him out for Newsom or Whitmer or whatever else they want to put in there. That's more probable, and I think it's more possible. Whether it's probable is another story. And I think she's a train wreck. And when you think about, just to George's point, her policies, her delivery, her demeanor, everything, her popularity, I think she passed Biden, I guess, in polls. Who knows? It's both sad.
Because it's been the opposite up until recently. I haven't seen a poll that I would consider trustworthy that actually says she's more popular than Biden. But Nico, it's a good point. I've heard that said. I just don't know what that poll is because she's been trailing him. Kamala Harris is, what are the words I used? And I mean them literally. She's dangerous and she's reckless. Number one, she's never met a no cash bail policy that she didn't like. And I think we talked about that in here before when that was a thing months ago. I think any serious politician ought to be immediately eliminated from consideration who thinks that no cash bail is a good idea. I don't know if you remember, Karen, but she is an unabashed supporter of BLM and Antifa.
Absolutely.
I mean, no, she really was out front. And while they were burning half the country down in the summer of 2020, she was advocating the Department of Justice that they wouldn't prosecute. I'll never forget that. And she never hesitates to invoke race and gender and ethnicity to diminish and damage her political opponents. This is a train wreck. This is the last thing that we need right now. And so if I had to pick between Biden and her, I would certainly pick him. And I think the last thing Trump wants right now is a change of the guard anyway, because he's looking really good against Biden.
But I think he's going to look just fine against Kamala too. But I mean, you have to ask the question that even if there would be a second term of Biden, would he finish that term? I mean, really, when you finish that term, so are you truly voting for Kamala Harris anyway? You have to think of it that way. I mean, that's not hyperbole. That's not speculation. I mean, that's speculation.
Like, how many times did they have to put him up on the stand and have him mess up without somebody saying, okay, there's really a problem here?
This is the part that I think I said this last week. Who did this surprise? I mean, this debate performance, is it really, it's in your face now, but who did it really surprise? It definitely shouldn't have surprised the people that ride on Air Force One with him. It definitely shouldn't have surprised Joe Biden. I mean, that woman's another story. I mean, we could talk a long time about that woman. I think she's very unethical and immoral. There's a lot of things to say about her and how she is not protecting her husband as she poses on the cover of Vogue, which whatever. I mean, so this just couldn't have surprised a lot of the reporters it really knew. Definitely didn't surprise people that are in closed doors meetings with him. It didn't surprise. How could it surprise Democrat lawmakers that have had meetings with him and that have, Pelosi and Schumer, did it really surprise them? Who talks to Joe Biden on a regular basis over the last 2 years that this surprised? I don't know. I mean, I would really question back. I would cross-examine and question their authenticity and honesty in that answer. But this didn't surprise anyone. So the question for me, we talked about off air, is why'd they do it? I know Salos asked the same thing. I mean, you have to ask yourself, why would the handlers, and it sucks that the president has handlers. I mean, he literally has handlers, not just advisors. But why would they let him do this?
There's nothing unplanned that the Democrats have done. That's why
this debate.
That's a great question, because I think that the debate was a reminder that people have been lied to all along. I mean, this has been known. Reports have come out saying that this has been pretty standard operating procedure.
Why so early on the debate too?
Well, that's a great, my goodness. Yeah, that's exactly right. But reports are coming out saying that all along inside, they've been talking about this kind of thing, this sort of, these cognitive fails, and how it's been basically insulated from the American public. And the debate was the first time really that a national audience got to sit in and have a front row seat into just how bad things are. And reports have come out and say that the president is functional between the hours of 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. Mm-hmm. That's crazy. A president of the United States, arguably the most powerful office in the world, see me between 10 a.m. and 4. I'm sorry, but international crises don't work on a schedule. Yeah. So that's just beyond crazy. And so the idea that we have a person who is arguably unable to discharge his powers, his duties in office, wow. So why so early? Because it's truly unprecedented. That's a great question. And I think that's what opens the doors to conspiracy theorists at this time. And Sal will always remind us that everybody who used to be a conspiracy theorist is now a truth teller. Just give them a little time. And maybe we're probably part of that too. Who knows? But why so early? That's a good point. Why do it so early? Typically, it doesn't happen, Nico, until after the convention.
Mm-hmm.
These are presumptives. They're not even
the candidates
nominees
yet.
That's right. It happens usually in September. But why now? Great point. I don't know.
Well,
the Daily Mail says that they think this is actually
a way to get him out.
Yeah, who was it? Was it Bob Hogue? Bob Hogue was a columnist on RedState.com, and he was commenting on Daily Mail, and he says that he thinks that this is a kind of soft coup. That they knew that Biden basically would short circuit. It would be, to use nuclear terms, a rapid disassembly on stage.
Well, someone didn't. This is the first time that if that's true. Again, I don't know for sure, but if that's true, someone didn't get the memo out to everybody else, because you have a lot of dissension in the Democrat Party.
Press
alone. From immediately after the debate, to some lawmakers saying this, others saying that, Newsom saying this, he's been steadfast and behind Biden, to certain people. This is the first time that I've seen, in my opinion, where they didn't get the memo out in time, because everybody's all over the place. And then I read something this week where the morale, understandably, at the White House and around the White House is extremely low. I mean, people don't know what the future holds. If Biden's going to be the nominee, there's all kinds of rumors. I mean, no one feels good, because when you don't have true leadership, it doesn't instill confidence. You can't trust that. And then with Biden, and then they probably know all the real rumors and all the scuttlebutt behind the scenes close to the White House. So they've known about this for a long time.
But
I always worry when I hear, there's rumors that the people in the White House. When I hear that, I'm like, okay, who let those rumors out? Because a lot of stuff is very controlled. What are they trying? Are they real rumors, or are they prepared, planned rumors?
I think that's a legitimate question. Because in the beginning of the presidency, nothing gets out of there.
Yeah.
I mean, there were no leaks, as opposed to Trump's White House.
Yeah.
It was a sieve.
Yeah.
But recently now, we're hearing more and more reports of Biden insiders and White House officials and that kind of thing. And so you wonder what's going on. And I get it. I get the skepticism. But look, Stephanopoulos' interview was pretty much confined to his health and his poll numbers. And he didn't ask about the 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. thing, which is a report that just came out. The other thing he didn't ask about, Nico, which I thought was weird, because I think it's significant, is that Biden the day before said he was proud to be the first black woman to serve
I
as a
thought
black
you were
president.
joking, Saulo.
You said that? I didn't hear about that.
Biden said he was proud to be the first black woman.
Where was that at?
It was at a what was the speech?
Was that the 4th of July? No.
What was the venue? For goodness' sake.
And he said he started NATO.
But no, please, it doesn't end. But to me, that's what stood out as the most glaringly bizarre, that he's the first black woman to serve with a black president. Come on. I mean, that's low-hanging fruit.
Terrible.
It's fresh. Stephanopoulos, I think, should have asked Mr. President, your thoughts on that. I don't know. But
Did he ask him about withdrawing from the race?
He said he's not going.
Yeah.
He's not going.
Only God can take him out.
The Lord Almighty.
Be careful.
And if you look closely at Biden,
He's going to tell him. He's going to tell him. He's on his way to tell him.
If you look closely at Biden, you'll see that the Lord Almighty looks an awful lot like his wife. She's the one who gets to make the call. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is.
I saw a video clip of I guess Jill Biden on The View, and she was just saying, "You're going to see he should." I mean, she was actually bragging, talking crap about debating, as if how could she not know that her husband was going to flop this thing?
Yeah.
And she was talking crap. I mean, I thought it was before a UFC fight, and you're going to see, and you're going to compare, and the other one can't even put. I mean, everything she said that Trump would be, meaning he can't put a sentence together, happened to her. And then Joe Scarborough, forget about it. That guy just drives me bonkers. I don't know how anybody, even if you hate Republicans or hate conservatives or whatever, or don't like, I hate to use the word hate, but people use that word, don't like all these things. Why would you listen to that dumbass?
And then when Stephanopoulos told him, when Biden says, look at us, who's got the better crowds?
Yeah.
Biden said that. Who's got the better crowds? And then
come on.
Stephanopoulos says, well, don't play the crowd game, the crowd card,
game,
because...
Yeah, you're going to lose that every time.
But then check out what he said. Biden answers, well, who does he have? No, he says, who does he have? And in my mind, Democrats are, I hate saying this, but they bring a lot of artists because they think that people are dumb. He says, yeah, we're going to just bring Hollywood, and make us look cool. And I think that's what Biden was at.
As if that's representative of National Electric.
Like, hey, we got stars.
It was at a radio station in Philadelphia, WURD.
About the black
that he
president.
said he was the first black woman to serve with a black president. Yeah. So,
That's horrible.
I mean, what do you do with that?
But just to the Scarboroughs of the world, I got to get back to that guy, because that guy just really frustrates me. To the Scarboroughs of the world, these are... Like, he didn't know him. And if you don't believe that this is the best Joe Biden we've ever had, F you. I mean, he said that on his morning show. Well, do we say F you back now, JoJo? Since you set that standard, can we say, can your audience say F you for telling us to F off? I mean, I don't understand. It's so delusional with some of these people. And that's why I give those three categories of Trump responses from people. There's Trump deranged syndrome. Scarborough and De Niro obviously have it. It's for sure. There's also Trump euphoria that he walks between, and Trump has Trump euphoria, but other people do too. That he does no wrong, which I think is ridiculous. He's not perfect. Only one person was perfect that walked this earth, and it wasn't Trump, and it wasn't me, and it wasn't anyone else listening. And then there's the third person, that's a Trump realist. I mean, there's the Trump fatigue, right? I talked about that in the past, that people liked him. I think there was a period of time where people like, oh, I like his policies. I want to vote for him. I'm just tired.
I want him to shut up. Yeah.
That's kind of dissipated more because now that he's the presumptive,
yeah.
I think that was more during the primary. But there's just a Trump realist, which I put myself in a Trump realist, that is going to vote for him, that supports his policies, that doesn't think it's as bad as everyone else, that will call balls and strikes. And when he irritates me, I'll say he irritates me. When I like what he like, I'm going to say it. But it's just fascinating to see the different categories that I've seen people fall into and how they interact with each other, and then where people will end up falling when it says, okay, like Paul Ryan, I'm not voting for him. You're an idiot. What are you going to vote for? You're going to vote for Joe Biden? I mean,
right there with Mitt Romney.
I mean, that's just insane to me.
I do hear people these days saying, I'm just not voting. And I'm like,
then you're
what?
Voting. You're voting.
Right,
You're
exactly.
voting by not voting. And if you're writing someone in, you're not voting. And if you're going to do a third part, you're not voting. I mean, if you really think of... for these little wins that you want to win in your closet, I took my stand. I guess so. Maybe I'm so pragmatic of a person that I'm into results in the sense of what are we trying to accomplish? How do we get there ethically, legally, and morally? And then what do we do to be, as Scripture says, Matthew 10:16, be shrewd as a snake, meaning be but innocent as a dove. I mean, so good intentions, be genuine, but also be strategic in how we get there. So I don't know. I think that's foolish for someone not to vote.
Truly.
On either side.
Truly, and what Trump's sitting really well right now. I think this is man. He's had a series of wins, and he's just really he's probably like pinching himself because he probably can't remember the last time he actually was this favored. And the poll numbers just keep improving. Coming into the debate, I think he was at maybe 1 point ahead of Biden in a real clear polling average, which is decidedly a combination of all kinds of polls that generally aren't that friendly to Trump. And now he's at +3, and he continues to climb. He's at +6 in a number of polls right now nationally. Man, and battleground states continue to improve week after week.
That in itself must be painful for a lot of people just to be able to report that. Hey, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back with more on Sidebar.
Creek as we work on cleaning that up. Also over
to us. And before we get to the Supreme Court ruling on presidential immunity, I have one simple question for you, George. And honestly, we're talking about everyone asking for Joe Biden to move aside, but what can really happen? I mean, I asked that in the beginning, but are there really like choices? I mean, what happens if he says no? What happens to Kamala? How does it all play out?
Well, Nico, this can't continue forever. I think that's what prompts the question. It can't,
They can talk about it all they
we're
want,
just going to
but
be talking. Is Joe going? Is it a stay? Is it a go? Is it a stay? And how long can that continue? And so at some point, my contention is it's going to be the Biden-Harris ticket, one form or the other. So Biden can say, "I'm not going anywhere. I'm the guy. I'm going to be the nominee. Period. End of story. The delegates have been assigned. You're stuck with me. So deal with it." That's one option. I think that's ultimately what's going to happen. Or I heard, rumor has it, to use Salo's terminology, that this guy likes money. Okay, and they might bribe him. They might give him a bunch of presidential libraries. They might say, we're going to guarantee pardons. We're going to give you tens of millions of dollars, in which case he'll step down and making away from Kamala Harris. That's another option. Now, maybe that's another option, right? What happens beyond that? I think those are the only two options. And if it becomes a bit of a war, a bit of a feud, and he doesn't want to step down, they're stuck with him. Unless they actually want to go there, which is to invoke the 25th Amendment. We've already talked about how messy that is. And that's the vice president and the cabinet. They have to come together and declare.
Yeah, but all this dissension, I mean, the Republican Party's never been more united. This just is...
That's a scary thing,
This is what it took, huh?
Yeah, I mean, if someone really watches, talk about the ebb and flow of politics. I always compare it to a fight. You lose the first two rounds, you think you're losing the fourth, fifth, then you turn around in the sixth, and then you just dominate all the way to the 12th, I mean, think about this. A year ago, no one would have even contemplated that this was going to go this way. I mean, the Democrat Party looked very united. Biden was being protected. There was a lot of, isolation, I like to call it, calculated isolation. Trump was under even more back then attacks. I mean, the Republicans were like, what? And during the primary, forget about it. It was a Royal Rumble. And then,
yes.
Trump came out of that victorious. And then he went under this. I think this trial, even though I think there's so many constitutional issues with it, it's going to get overturned eventually. But they just wanted the conviction title, and then that turned on them because of the fundraising, because of his popularity, because people saw through it. It was just ridiculous. And then they came, and then now you have this dissension on this side. Then you ask yourself, Democrats have been pretty damn good strategists. This doesn't seem very strategic. This really seems fractured. And why would you put him up there? Why so early? All this other stuff. Trump agreed to all this. I mean, everything from the camera views to the questioning. Look, Jake Tapper overall did a good job. I thought he did. I thought both of them did. And Bash, whatever her name is. I mean, I thought they did a fairly decent job. I mean, there's not much to criticize. The one thing somebody criticizes is that Jake Tapper protected him on that very famous answer he gave where they, we saved Medicare. I didn't look at the clock. I didn't know if was he done with his 2 minutes? If he wasn't, well, then he should have pushed back and said, you still have 45 seconds like he did numerous times to both candidates. He did that to Biden in different ways. So, but regardless. So I'm just fascinated by this. It shows kind of the ebb and flow of politics. Now, Trump, I hope he's disciplined. Talking about another debate, I don't think he needs another debate. I don't know if he's doing it because he knows they're not going to let Biden do it. And he just wants to say, like, look, let's do another. Why would you do another? Well, what are you going to gain from another debate? Your polls are going up. Keep doing what you're doing. You don't have these court cases. I mean, by an act of God, I mean, all these other things have been stayed or reversed or this or going on appeal. He's not going to be in a courtroom for the most, it seems like, before the election. Everything has to be appealed. Then some things are going to go away. Things have been stayed. I mean, now you can just purely campaign. All this stuff turned into a campaign opportunity for him, which was a blessing in disguise. I mean,
yeah, I don't know. Never get in the way of your enemy self-destructing.
Yeah,
right?
just
let him continue to do that.
Instead of debating him, I'd say, let's do an open interview. Don't even debate each other. Let's just
never going to happen.
Let's do an open. Yeah. Let's do a side-by-side open interview. That we're not going to debate each other. We're going to do open interviews or do whatever you want to do.
Isn't that what he proposed, Trump, yesterday?
I don't know. I didn't hear about it yesterday.
He proposed. Apparently, he threw the gauntlet down and says, "Let's have a conversation. No moderators, and let's just talk." And he says, "And I'll let him prepare." let him answer this.
They'll never let
Yeah, he called it a debate, but it would be kind of
but then that's going to be, they're going to be talking over each other. Then we're going to go back. This format actually was good. I thought it was good. I thought it benefited Trump, cutting off the mics.
I agree. Yeah.
I mean, think about the debates we've seen in the past years now, compared to that.
Yep.
That's, to me, that was a good debate in the sense of, forget about substance for a second.
It's a great
I'm talking
point.
style.
It kept Trump's strengths from becoming a weakness.
Yeah.
Because Trump tends to, he's freewheeling. And it can get, after a while, it can just get into all kinds of rabbit trails that have nothing to do with the price of bread in Moscow. I mean, he just goes off, right? And that's great at a rally. That's great. I mean, if you're a bunch of people sitting across from each other, basically having a virtual beer, that's fine. National debate, not so much. So that's a great point. But where does this go? Follow throughout the term, well, what if there's a medical emergency? Well, if there's a medical emergency, there's a medical emergency. I mean, if Biden is incapacitated, that makes the 25th Amendment aspect certainly much more easy to invoke. But unless Biden's incapacitated in some way, it never, ever ends. The Democrats don't want to go there. Before you came in from the break, Nico, I was just giving a quick Cliff's Notes version of the steps from invocation to restoration of the president's powers, to Congress getting involved. It is a freaking mess, and it never ends. At any given point, the president, if he's not incapacitated, can claim his powers, and it starts a process over and over again. It's a clown show. They don't want to go there. So where does this go? I think you're stuck with Biden-Harris.
But I think that even the thought of Kamala being going from being vice president to president, don't you think that in itself is going to cause some problems within the Democratic Party? I mean, they don't like her either.
Oh, they don't like her either. I mean, I don't think her husband likes her. Nobody really likes her. It's tough. I mean, I'm not. I don't even say she's not a likable person.
No.
At least we think he does.
You know, but no, I'm not. I'm saying this not to be funny. I mean, her staff. How many staff members has she lost?
Right.
If that was really covered the way it should have been covered, I mean, that's odd. I mean, that many staff members.
Yeah.
They know something we don't know. She's, an interesting lady. And so she's just not a likable person.
No.
And she didn't do anything she did well. Whether she was DA, whether she was attorney, whatever her positions were. I mean, her position she took, making fun of people for smoking marijuana, they're going to prison. She just wasn't. She was completely against everything that she advocates now, because she's an opportunist. Most of these people are, where they change. And if you genuinely change a position based off more information, I respect that. That's called maturity. I've done that many times. I'm going to continue to do that until the Lord takes me home. But she just did it because of the opportunity. And same with Biden too. I mean, if you listen to Biden's positions in 2008 versus now, it's ridiculous.
And if you think the country's divided now, you haven't seen anything yet.
Yeah.
It would be, although I would like a debate between Kamala Harris and Trump.
Well, when is he going to do? When is he going to decide on his VP? That he's already decided, apparently.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I mean,
We're looking at you, George.
I'm hearing the decision at the convention.
And that's going to be when?
July
when is that?
11th?
Is that a July convention, right? And then the Democrats in August, Salo?
I think it's the 11th.
July convention for...
Or 18th, maybe. I'm not sure.
That's this month.
For Republicans,
This month.
I thought.
Look, I mean, good for Trump. I can't believe it hasn't leaked out by now. That's good. I mean, because when he was in the White House, everything was getting leaked. And so... That's good.
Yeah, it was a sieve.
All right.
Okay, good news for Trump, I would imagine, with this Supreme Court ruling. You want to talk about that a tiny bit?
Well, we mentioned at the beginning. I thought it was of course, it was a good ruling for him. He has absolute immunity when it comes to constitutional issues, Article 2 issues of the duties of the president. He has presumptive immunity, and presumptions is a high burden to overcome. So if you have to, I'll give you an example in Texas. So in Texas, if you use deadly force in your home at nighttime, there is a presumption that you acted in self-defense. I mean, that's a presumption that the government has to overcome. So they're charging you with murder, but they have to overcome the presumption of self-defense in your home. We call it the Castle Doctrine. It's not called that here, but what most people can relate to. There's a strong presumption of self-defense. The use of deadly force is justifiable in your home, especially at nighttime, but in your home, period. So you have this strong presumption that you acted reasonably under the law. So that's what there's a presumption if he is doing official acts that he's got immunity for that. So that has to be a determination that has to be vetted out by a court, and then it affects the evidence that can be presented. So now that's why people are bringing up this New York case, because the evidence, you can't even use official acts or things that the president is immune from. Any president.
So why is that? So the DC case is blown out of the water under Tanya Chutkan, right? Because what were the charges? It was a 4-indictment deal, 4-count deal. And it was all about Trump's challenging the electoral outcome of 2020, and that he repeatedly, knowingly spread false claims about electoral fraud. Right? And in what capacity to do that? Of course, he's at January 6th. He's giving the speech, and he is repeatedly pushing that issue in the waning months of his presidency. And then they threw out intent in there, that he was willingly doing that, even though he knew, because people around him told him that there was no electoral fraud. Even though he knew that, he kept pushing. So what's interesting about this particular Supreme Court ruling is that intent has nothing to do with it. It's irrelevant. And so the question becomes, if leave, that there's a serious problem with this election. I believe we reached this outcome through untoward, if not illegal means. And he goes to his Department of Justice. I think it was the acting Attorney General at the time, Jeffrey Rosen. And he goes to him, because remember, Bill Barr had just resigned in December. And I would say arguably over this very issue, because Barr said, oh, yeah, the FBI and Department of Justice have looked into it, and there's no evidence of mass fraud.
And I'm out of here.
Right, and I'm out of here. So he resigned, but we know he was kind of encouraged. So mid-December, he's out, and then an acting Attorney General comes in, Jeffrey Rosen. He's in there for basically a month. And so Trump's having conversations with Barr about electoral fraud. He's having conversations with Jeffrey Rosen. And Roberts, in his decision, said that, what was the language? Under our constitutional structure of separated powers, a former president is entitled to absolute immunity for acts that fall within the conclusive and preclusive constitutional authority, right. And he's entitled to at least a presumptive immunity for his official acts. And then he went on to define his official acts, the very things that Trump did in talking to his attorney general, White House officials, Department of Justice, and other parties concerning electoral fraud. So where is this case in Washington, D.C. going to go, Nico? To your point, it's going to go nowhere. And then I wonder about Fulton County.
Don't talk about Fulton County yet. Let's take a break, and we're going to come right back with more on Sidebar. Can't get my headphones in, and that's why I was delayed. I was just reading some of the comments on Facebook Live, and people are still on the whole Kamala thing. They can't get past that. And I do.
What do you mean?
Well, they're just saying that if I know we didn't continue with the conversation, and we will, George, but every single comment is what happens if the Democrats don't accept Kamala as the person that goes into the place of Joe Biden when he is pushed out. I mean, does it has to be her, right?
I appreciate the question. I really do. It's a legitimate question. But if you look at reports that are coming out, you can see that they're starting a surge around Kamala. You're seeing reports, why not Kamala? Oh, she's not so bad. I mean, you're starting to see reports. You're starting to see some signs that they're coalescing around Kamala, because anything outside the Biden-Harris, the Biden-Harris ticket is a vexed and thorny process to undertake. Again, forget the 25th Amendment stuff. It's not going to happen. And so there is no other mechanism. There really isn't. And then to allocate, I like that you brought that up because I think we should go back to it. The Federal Election Commission has said they actually don't know how in the world they would allocate $225 million to somebody else. They basically would have to start to campaign.
That's the issue, man. You have to start fundraising.
Money matters.
Again. I mean, yeah, you're going to start that campaign fundraising all over again.
So the money can only go to her.
Right.
Yes.
It has to stay in that, from my understanding, between Biden and Harris, because that's the ticket that money was donated to.
And so I think that's the only hope. If they can bribe Biden or otherwise encourage Mr. Biden and the acting president, the fake Dr. Jill Biden, if they can do that and let Kamala step in, then I think that makes the most sense.
Do you think that makes for a better feeling for Democrats? Like, oh, well, we are going to vote for a black woman to be president.
I think it's an anyone but Joe moment because they want anyone but Trump. So it's just anyone but mindset. I don't think that's the way you choose your president. You know, the bottom line is this, to go back to Paul Ryan's thing, he's not going to vote. So Paul Ryan claims to be a conservative. He claims to be a Republican. Okay, well then here are your choices. I thought Bill Barr's logic was very sound when he talked about this comment, because they tried to pit Paul Ryan versus Bill Barr because they asked Paul Ryan, well, Bill Barr said he's going to vote for Trump. He tends to vote for Trump regardless of his opinions of this, that, and the other. And he goes like, well, I disagree with him. I was like, okay, so what are you going to do? You're going to vote for Joe Biden? You're not going to vote for the first time ever? How long has it been since you voted for a president? Are you going to just stay out of the presidential, vote?
That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
It's asinine. I was like, what are you doing? Now, this is personal. This guy sleep with your wife? I mean, what are you talking about? I mean, it's like a Robert De Niro delusion. I mean, it's too personal.
Excellent, and that's the word. I think there's something fundamentally wrong with Paul Ryan and Mitt Romney. These people are either delusional, like clinically delusional, or they are corrupt. That's the only thing that explains their positions. I mean, it's just completely irrational. But Nico, I wanted to close that question that came up.
Please.
The Telegraph, there's a piece in the it's the only place where I found it. I got to go across the water sometimes to England. Telegraph.co.uk has a piece called Kamala Harris Team Considers White Man VP for Presidential Run. This goes back to the point of Kamala Harris and her campaign cannot help themselves. They have constantly invoking race and gender and ethnicity. They said allies of Kamala Harris are discussing the selection of a white man as her vice president as support for her taking over as the party's presidential candidate grows. And so what are the options? Governor Andy Beshear from Kentucky, I mean, an otherwise red state. The guy's done really well in there, so that's one option. The other option was Roy Cooper, North Carolina governor, as another option. So looking to do basically what Barack Obama did. Barack Obama found his white man vice president to bring in contingencies that normally he wouldn't be able to reach. And so that's the play here. And the Telegraph's a pretty great source of news. You guys want to check that out and look at it. They go on and on and on about it. It seems to be converging around Kamala if Biden doesn't quite make it. The question is, are Biden and Jill going to say, sure, we'll go along with it? And if so, what would it take to make that happen?
Well, I don't know. I mean, either a threat or a bribe. I mean, think about it. I mean, Joe Biden has really revealed herself to be apparently a very power-driven woman. I just don't know who would do this to their husband. I just don't. I'm really trying to look at this with clear eyes.
Legit question.
I mean, who would do this to? Now, Hunter, I can understand why he wants his pop to stay in there because that's his only safety net. I mean, and if Joe goes out, he's going to Biden him. He's going to pardon him.
He's going to jail, right?
Yeah, he's going to pardon him anyway. But I mean, I really think that Jill is taking the criticism that she rightfully deserves as the spouse of an elderly man that obviously has no. I mean, just look, after the debate, we talked about it last week briefly, but I'm glad it's appropriate. Not even glad, it's just appropriate for it to have come up a number of times this week. That speech she gave when he was sitting there, Joe. Right. You answered all the questions. You understood all the issues.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, it was just
cringeworthy.
It was terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, even people that are devout Democrats were like, ugh, I wanted to vomit in my mouth. It was ridiculous. But that's a legitimate criticism. And then she goes, what is, I mean, he lies. And then Joe's just looking there with this blank face like, Mommy, did I do okay? I mean, and that's, I mean, it's sad to watch, regardless of what you think about policies and how you think someone's corrupt or not. It really is sad to watch.
So it really comes down to Joe Biden and Kamala. Love to be sitting on that conversation. According to CNN, a document reportedly written by unnamed senior operatives within Democratic political institutions has been circulating in Washington, titled, quote, "Unburdened by What Has Been, the Case for Kamala," end of quote. It lays out the case for Vice President Harris stepping into the breach. There's one path out of this mess, and it's Kamala, the document says. Kamala Harris has the strongest claim to Democratic legitimacy. And lastly, she is the only candidate who can take the reins right now instead of in late August when less than 3 months left to go.
Biden has said several times that Kamala is the future of the Democratic Party. In several interviews,
well, that's probably a true statement.
It's a true statement because I'll tell you this. You guys we're thinking, okay, who's the best option? I don't think it's the best option for president. I think it's the best option for a puppet for the Democratic Party, and it is Kamala. Because they're not looking for, who's going to be a good president? No, we need a good puppet. So Biden was a good puppet for now Kamala is.
Yeah, but what about who can get the votes for the Democratic Party?
If you remember, Joe Biden was floundering in 2020. It wasn't until Jim Clyburn stepped in and really coalesced a significant surge of the black vote around Joe Biden, kind of put him over the top. Joe, he's come out and he says that he'd be happy to support Kamala in the event that Biden was to step down. So this comes down, literally, to your point, I think Joe Biden's in charge. Jill Biden's in charge. I think it's a conversation between the Kamala folks and Jill Biden. What's it going to take? How many presidential libraries? How many millions of dollars? Right? How many promises to pardon them? Guarantees to pardon them? I think it's going to come down to that conversation.
Look, I mean, when it gets down to CNN and The View turning on Joe, you're in trouble.
Whoa, I know that is bad.
You're just in trouble. I mean, when Joe Scarborough says, I don't know what to do. I mean, it's you expect it from Bill Maher. I mean, because he's been pretty consistent on criticizing, both sides, of course, but including quote unquote his side. But you're seeing criticism we've never seen before. People that in the past have intentionally protected him and isolated him and lied for him or whatever, covered for him, are now turning on him. I mean, it's a legitimate question. Why?
Fauci's still right there behind him.
But this is these are multiple news sources, Nico, that have already moved. They've moved beyond Biden, at least, mentally and rhetorically. Yeah. New York Magazine is saying, hey, this notion of the country's prospective first black woman likely leaning towards a white guy governor. That's the narrative that seems to be coalescing from multiple sources. So anyway.
So here we are, the 4th of July weekend, and this is happening in our world today. Do you think our founding fathers would have ever imagined that we would be in this position?
If you truly understand what they went through, as we talked about before. I mean, many of these men sacrificed it all. They all signed their name on the dotted line, as we say in combat sports. God bless you. To leave it all in the ring, and they did. I mean, I love when George brings up those. 5 of the signers were captured and tortured to death. 12 lost their homes and all their property. 2 lost their sons at least. 9 of the 56 fought in the war themselves. I mean, these are people that said, "Look, we're signing this document. We're putting everything on the line. This is not just Twitter wars or online talking crap online.
Life and limb.
I mean, this was everything. They were separated from their families, their wives, their everything." I think it's fascinating when you read James Madison's letters to Abigail, his wife. Those are equivalent to our emails today, talking about the contention between the 13 colonies and how Benjamin Franklin, ironically, the one that, he said, "Look, guys, we got to pray. We need to fast and pray," and that's what they did. And they prayed. They asked for divine intervention. We see that divine intervention in the document. And we look at it, if you study Isaiah 33:22, even if you're not a Christian, you understand the 3 branches of government are around an executive branch, judicial branch, and a legislative branch. And that's directly from the scripture. I mean, they prayed on a psalm. It was just, when you really understand the history, you don't have to like it if you're not a Christian. I get that. But this is what happened. I mean, it was really a fascinating time. I did this post, and I put it together years ago. George chimed in on it. I was working on it myself, and I really wanted to try to make it a little bit more complete. And every year I post it on July 4th. I was in office when I was either in office or right after office when I put this together. But it just, I can't, I try to change it every year, and I just can't. And here it is. On July 4th, 1776, the Continental Congress convened and signed the Declaration of Independence. This proclaimed the 13 American colonies, one nation, the United States of America, independent from Great Britain's reign. Our founding fathers understood the importance of building a nation founded in divine order and principles. They purposely mentioned God 4 times within this document in 3 capacities: legislator, laws of nature and nature's God, as creator or executive, and then supreme judge of the world, and as guardian, divine providence. These principles were derived from Isaiah 33:22, and I encourage everyone to read this passage. Our founding fathers, James Madison in particular, actually quoted this scripture on a number of occasions. See Madison's reading on, quote, the perfect governor. Let us remember this foundation that has kept our country so strong and resilient since its establishment on this 4th of July holiday. God bless each and every one of you. May God continue to bless our country. Have a wonderful day with your family. I mean, there's a lot there when you study the history there. I'm fascinated by history. I arguably couldn't care less about it when I was younger, like a dumbass, and I just barely got by. And now I can't get enough of it. I just don't have enough time to study it. But the founding of this country was not founded on racism. We talk about that all the time before. Yes, there were people that had those leanings and ideology that it's evil and demonic and all that things. But that wasn't the foundation. This was the foundation. It was freedom. There was a biblical understanding of creator and a creator that gives us these inalienable rights that we are afforded, not from government. And so it wasn't a big government. It was a big person. It was a big citizen that was supposed to govern this country. And so that's why it's by the people, for the people, of the people. And I want to hear from the people, and the people need to get involved, and I hope we continue to do that. And so I hope that people enjoyed their 4th of July. We're going to continue on for another 30 minutes or so on the after show. Hope you'll join us. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the weekend. God bless you. Stay safe.
We're back.
Where did you go?
Well,
Can you hear anything?
I don't have mine, so
I'm good.
okay.
Go ahead.
Seriously, I mean, the
Speak,
way you
Karen.
closed off the show was amazing. And every time you talk about all of these, the letters, John Adams, everything, it gives me goosebumps. And it does make me sad because when I read about the 4th of July just recently, they put the 2 words together, patriotism and pride. And when I saw the word pride, even the word pride make me think about the division on just that word alone for the month of June. It's Pride Month, and it took on such a different meaning. But as we move forward for our own kids, I just wonder, how can we push things back? I don't even know if we need to push them back to the way they used to be, but push them back in a direction where Americans can be civil together. I don't know.
Well, I mean, we have a journey of trying to persuade people. We have to persuade people over ideas. Again, forget the labels, forget the tribes, ideas. Let's have a discussion about ideas. Let's go back to back in Athens when we get into the square and we're debating and we're doing all this back and forth trying to persuade people, which is what university truly means, right? It's unity and diversity. University. Ironically, there's no diversity in universities anymore. And that's where you bring these wonderful ideas and you test them out in the public. And you debate and you take questions and cross-examine each other. And then you go back and you set an idea and then people are listening. I love that. I think that's a good vetting process of ideas. We've shut that down when you censor people. That's why the First Amendment is number one. I mean, people should be able to talk. You should be able to share your thoughts. You have a right to be a dumbass. You have a right to be wrong. You have a right to be stupid. And in the court of public opinion, when you vet those ideas out, people put the ideas where they belong. They'll shelf you. They'll vote against you. They'll give you a verdict. That's what the court system is. Excuse me. That's what our judicial system is. It's you're proposing ideas based off evidence, and you're asking them to come back with a verdict. And they come back with a verdict after deliberating and hearing opening statements, direct examination, cross-examination, evidence, and then summation, closing arguments, and then they render their verdict. That's why I love our justice system. I think it's proper. Now, when you start messing with that and that process, and you start shutting people down, you can't say this, you can't say that. Well, then you're skewing the results. I mean, you're mixing up the equation. And so we need to persuade people. We need to be prepared to have conversations. We need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Of course, I always say to the men's Bible study, and I see on R-Rated Christianity, don't violate the 11th commandment. Don't be a dick.
That's my favorite.
That's the truth. Don't be an asshole. Don't be a dick. I mean, that's the 11th commandment. It's in there somewhere in Exodus, I promise you. But we really be courageous. You're going to be called names anyway, just for the fact that you're standing for something that everybody else is not standing for. But you stand firm. You be able to back it up, and you persuade people that makes more sense. Not, I told you I was right. Don't be an arrogant prick. I mean, that part irritates me, and laugh at people and get in an echo chamber, and everyone's laughing in this little corner. What does that do for us? I want to win. We need to move the needle. How do we win people over? And even if the person you're trying to beat down and get your little badge of honor knows they're wrong, they're not going to admit it just based off pride and haughtiness. I'm not going to admit I'm wrong to this dickhead. I mean, what am I going to say? So just to spite you, they're going to not agree with you. No, I want to win people over, because ultimately, for us to change this country, we got to vote differently, and people have to start living differently, and then school boards need to be different. I mean, there needs to be a complete shift in ideas. Yeah. That's why I like to encourage people to talk about ideas, and you have to do that in the proper way, in my opinion.
Continue to identify that ultimately we have a truly spiritual problem in the country. These political issues are manifestations of a deeper issue. And the Declaration of Independence addresses that, doesn't it, Nico? I mean, it's really the document preceding the revolution, if you think about it. And there are constant references to God, Nico knows this, in the Declaration of Independence. The laws of nature, nature's God, which you just mentioned, endowed by their creator, the supreme judge of the world. I mean, there are references to divine providence, this idea that God inserts himself and governs in the affairs of men, which is why I've always, for years and years and years, have just vehemently disagreed with this notion that a lot of the founders were so-called deists, which is the notion that God creates the universe, in this case, created the earth, set it spinning on its axis, and basically took a hike, endowed human beings with reason, and left the governance of affairs basically to them. The Declaration is an outright philosophical assault on that very idea. God inserts himself in the affairs of men, and he cares how people conduct themselves. So if we have hope to be a civil nation, the founders basically asked rhetorically, here's how we do it. We are going to ground the very revolution on the notion that God exists and that human beings are endowed with certain rights and that they were created to be free, to make their own decisions about themselves, how they're going to worship, decisions for their kids. Human beings are endowed with that. They weren't given those rights by the government. The government exists to secure those rights,
to protect them.
But those rights came from God. We have a higher appeal. When you and I don't get along, there are certain lines we don't cross. I don't have a right to take your life because your life doesn't belong to me. You don't have a right to dehumanize me because I fundamentally matter to someone who's a lot higher than you, and that's the Creator God. So we've lost that court of appeals. And so now it's just, what's the word used? It's nothing but tribal. It's who's the noisiest, who can get the most likes on social media, who can get the most retweets. It's all about power. And that's why we seem to lack, Nico, the ability to be civil, because we've lost the grounding of the Declaration. That's the problem. Declaration's still there, But the grounding, the commitment to the grounding of the Declaration, the idea that there's a God to whom we are all accountable, that's been diluted in the country, and we're seeing the consequences of that.
Yeah,
I thought you wanted to say something.
no,
Sal.
it's
Sorry.
just, you're making me think because we're always talking about that we need to convince people on ideas, and sometimes it's like we're trying to convince them to be Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, and I don't think that's the game anymore. I think we need to go a little bit back and make them fall in love with the idea of America more, because I haven't seen somebody say, "Oh yeah, you're right. I used to be a Democrat. Now I'm convinced." There's a few of them out there, but I don't think that's happening anymore because people are so emotional now. And I'm like, okay, instead of bringing you to my side, let's bring you to a side which is American. I don't know.
What's the idea of America to you? I guess because what we're saying is some of these fundamental ideas
Yes, good question.
undergird America.
Clarify that.
What is America?
Like freedom, the way they fought, like what you were talking about, our founding fathers.
So the ideals upon which the American Republic was founded,
Yeah.
not necessarily America, because everybody's crafting their own
Got it,
version
got
of
it. I
America.
agree.
Is that
I
what you mean?
Yeah.
Nico, you've quoted this. We've quoted it. We've done seminars where we come back to John Adams' proclamation, his letter to the Massachusetts militia in 1798, which I find beautiful and gets to the heart of the issue that Salo's bringing up here and that we're talking about. Most people who quote it quote the last part, but I want to go back to the first two sentences.
Do it.
And he says this.
Who is he writing to?
He's writing to the Massachusetts militia in 1798. Quote, "We have no government armed with power capable of contending with human passions unbridled by morality and religion." Listen to that again. There is no such thing, he's saying, as a government armed enough with power capable of contending with human passions unbridled by morality and religion. If our leaders, if the people who represent this great country aren't bridled by morality and religion, there isn't a power in government big enough to contain them and the consequences. And he goes on, avarice, beautiful word, ambition, revenge, or gallantry would break the strongest cords of our Constitution as a whale goes through a net, he says. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. The whole nation rests on the notion that God exists. We are all accountable to him. And really, Nico, there is no liberty, is there? In their view, there is no liberty unless there is a commitment to these ideals. And where do they come from? And this is where we come back to. They come from the Judeo-Christian ethic. There were about 3 million people in 1776 in the country, and 99.8% of them consider themselves Orthodox Christian.
Yeah.
So what principles
Nobody
do you
knows
think?
that. Nobody pays attention to that. 3 million people. There's over 330 million people now. 3 million people, and 99 plus, we'll just say plus to be 99 plus were Orthodox Christian. So when you talk about freedom of or freedom from religion and separation, which separation of power, separation of church and state is not in any of the documents. It's in a letter from from Thomas Jefferson, then president, to the Dansbury Baptists in 1801. And saying, thank you for your prayers. We need to separate, church and state, meaning, hey, state, you don't come into our business in the church. Leave us the hell alone. It's not the other way around. State, church, you can't come into our state business. That's been bastardized over the years. It made itself into case law over the years, and now it's become precedent. It's not that it's part of our statutes or our laws or our declaration or Declaration of Independence or Constitution. But those are great points, George. And when you think about that, okay, if there's 3 million people and 99.9% were Orthodox Christian, then what ideology, what ethic do you think they were talking about? I mean, that they weren't talking about Islam.
Exactly.
They weren't talking about Hindus or Buddhists or anything else. And now, of course, I understand that the separation. I mean, I understand the Establishment Clause and one's forcing you to worship Christ as your Savior. But there was a set of ideas that undergirded this country. They were Judeo-Christian ideas. That's all.
I don't get, why is it so offensive to display the 10 Commandments or even say, okay, our country was founded on these, Christian values. Why is that offensive to somebody that is not a Christian?
Because the competing political view and the religious view is a Marxist view, and the Marxist view is an atheistic view. It places human beings at the top of the pyramid in terms of who gets to govern. It's human beings. It's basically what we're trying to do here is go back to the ideals of the French Revolution. The French Revolution was an exact opposite. It was going on essentially at the same time, a little bit later, from 1789 to 1799. And it was a revolution, Nico, whose ideals were unmoored to morality and religion. They not only threw out the monarchy, but they threw out the Christian institutions, the Christian ideals that had basically made France a great country at the time. Look at country now. You often bring this up. Why do you think that we are now in the midst of the fifth French Republic under Emmanuel Macron since 1958? There was the fourth republic, the third republic. What's that?
Shut
What's it in your throat?
Yeah. Emmanuel Macron. Sorry. Hey, man. Macron. Should I Englishize that?
Sorry.
Macron.
I thought you were clearing your throat like I was earlier.
His name is Emmanuel Macron, but let me call him
Speaking Arabic.
Manny Macron. How's that? I'll Englishize him.
That's
Manny
right.
Macron.
That's right. I couldn't
All right,
pass it
so
up, sorry.
Manny
What were you like
Macron,
in high school?
Manny Macron
I
is
was a
serving,
nut.
is serving under the Fifth Republic of France that came in 1958. Before that, we had the fourth, the third, second, the First Republic, and then we had another monarchy, and then we had an empire and another monarchy. There has been more turnover in France.
Yeah.
We have not had such a thing. This is the consequences. You can literally do a side-by-side analysis of the ideals in the French Revolution and what they fought for, and the ideals in the American Revolution, and you can compare, and it's not even close. Look at the powerhouse. We've got 4.5% of the world's population, and we command nearly 50% of the world's wealth. And that happened by happenstance.
Yeah.
We can go on and on and on about what a truly exceptional country this country is, and it's because of the ideals. And this is really what Alexis de Tocqueville argued,
Yeah.
right? And he argued that America is truly an exceptional country.
And we were only 50 years old at the time when he came over here and he writes his book and he makes his observation. He goes, what is it with these some bitches? Because these Americans are taking over everything. And it's
A paraphrase, but that's
I'm
true.
sorry. That's the NLT Nicola Hood translation. But when he was saying, look, these are righteous people. They know how to treat each other. There's a set of ideas that undergirds that. And they were educated people. Because if you're educated, number one, you can't be fooled. I mean, and that's what our founding fathers wanted. And that's what Alexis observed. These were educated people. They were well read. There wasn't the internet. I mean, you had to went out of your way to know things. And true journalism kept the people informed and kept power under check. So they were educated and they were virtuous. That's what he said. Okay, well, virtuous in what way? What set of virtues are you going to treat other people with and show to other folks? And those were the Judeo-Christian virtues. I mean, that's just a fact. Now, were they played out properly? No. Was slavery still in existence? Yes. Were people bastardizing scripture to justify slavery? Absolutely. And they will be held accountable for it if they have not repented. Period. End of story. No one gets. Colossians 3 talks specifically about that. I was teaching on this last week. We were at the men's Bible study. I mean, no one gets away with it. Everybody will be. That's brought me solace in all the shit that I've been through, going through politics, and people just lie, cheat, and steal, and they want to try to destroy you because you think differently because you'll stand up to them. And I'm still going to forge forward and trust the Lord for everything. And He's been good, and so I'm never too tired to talk about Him. But no one. But that's been my catch. My safety net, my eternal insurance policy for me. No one gets away with anything. So it's allowed me to release vengeance, to release all this kind of stuff that we hold on to naturally in the flesh. And I had a PhD in, by the way, before Christ. But because no one's going to get away with it. Now we hope people have opportunities to repent. So all this matters. I mean, this set of ideas so we've gotten away from all of that. All I'm saying is we've gotten away from everything. When we talk about today, when you look at what the country looked like back then, and yes, there was some wrong things that were happening. I got it because we're wrapped in flesh. People suck. I get that. But then we have to have some set of ideas to root them down. What's going to anchor us when the ship tries to sail out of the bay? What anchors you? Something has to anchor you. You're just going to keep on sailing away. And it was the Constitution, the Declaration, but before that, under that, was these set of ideas, this ideology. And it was Judeo-Christian in nature. And then I love that can't say that enough, George, about the population back then and the Orthodox Christianity that was prevalent back then. Again, if you're atheist, if you're agnostic, if you're Hindu, Buddhist, fine. But that doesn't change the history of this country.
That's right.
And that doesn't change why this country flourished, yes, imperfectly, but still flourished, and why people wanted to come figure it out. And when you look at how many constitutions other countries have, 11, 10, 9, 6, 4, whatever, and we've had one, and still have one. What was this year turn?
And
200 what?
And the frequency
year?
of the turnover. the frequency of the turnover in the constitutions. That's the thing, the lack of stability. I think we can't just sort of blow that off and say, well, that's not a big deal. That is a big deal. We have the stability that we have because for so many years, for centuries, we've been able to appeal to a higher law. The laws of nature, nature's God, which is a beautiful way to phrase it. It ultimately goes back to Henry Blackstone's commentary on the laws of England, which was a prevailing legal text in the day, and remains so for many years. And that's how it's termed. It's basically that there's a moral lawgiver, and that moral lawgiver has embedded in nature and in human beings a sense of what's right and wrong. And that ultimately, when we're resolving disputes, that's lingering in the back of our mind. There's a limit to which I can go to dehumanize you and to steamroll you. And so that's why we say that basically secures the liberty of the American people. Until we get back to those things, Nico, until we have leaders that urge us back to those ideals.
Yeah.
And we actually talk about what it means as a nation in our academic institutions. From the time our kids enter in kindergarten, or even pre-K, this idea of what it means to be a law-abiding citizen, to be a contributing American. What does that even mean? What does it mean to be an American, right? To talk about the things that unify us. Until we get back to that, I don't know how we can become a civil nation again.
And Alex on Facebook Live says to Nico, the thing is that there are no consequences. Yes, what you said is true, but there are no consequences with everything that's been happening in the last 4 years. Not a single person has been held accountable. And then, of course, Martha says, so true, Nico, we all have to give God an account of our wrongs.
Well, look, no one's been held accountable yet because we have a timeline that we want to be. Look,
that's so true.
I know.
I'm so guilty of that.
What are we playing off of? How many rounds is in your fight? Mm-hmm. My rounds are eternal. That has given me peace, or else I'd be a nut job. I mean, I'm arguably a nut job anyway, maybe. But I would not be at peace. I would not be at peace, and it would affect everything in my life. Look, you don't know what it's like, and you don't know what you believe until you've been attacked for your beliefs. I mean, truly attacked, not criticized. I mean, attacked. Mm-hmm. And so we're playing long ball here. Who doesn't think that Joe Biden, in my humble opinion, is being exposed? Who doesn't think? It wasn't on my time. It wasn't on anything. Who doesn't think that there's been a shift in the fight in this country? Now it can change. I mean, you have different governors that are doing things, different state legislatures that are doing things, but I don't want to force these things on people. I want buy-in. That's the difference. There's a time to force things. Don't get me wrong. Self-defense is a forceful act. I mean, fighting is a forceful act. All that stuff, war, God forbid, all that. I get that. But I'm just saying, there's two ways to govern. It's by force or by talking. Force or persuasion. We set this country up to govern by persuasion. That's through talking. That's how we set it up. Now, there's contingencies. I get it. But if we want this country to flourish, we have to have buy-in. The great melting pot, the American way, as Salo was mentioning earlier. I mean, that's something. Think about that. Ellis Island, people came in. My grandfather came in from Lebanon with his mom, and then they were just going to visit. Awesome. Look how God works. They were just going to visit, and then there was a war back in Lebanon. They got stuck here. So then little by little, they all came over here. My grandfather taught himself how to speak and communicate in 7 languages. From Lebanon, you spoke Arabic, English, and French. And then he learned Spanish and Italian because there were different neighborhoods back then. And he sold fruit. He had to make a living. 3rd year, he taught himself how to read and write and do arithmetic. I mean, my jid, you say jid though in Arabic. But my grandfather, I mean, he's a fascinating individual. I wish he passed away when I was older. I remember him. But my children are blessed to still have my pop at 87 years old. That's what I ever prayed for. All I'm saying is, I get it, Alex, but it's never going to change, and people aren't going to be held accountable unless we change the people running the government. That's it. You got to change people in charge. And when you have 33% voting rates of registered voters, and then look at other people that don't even register, and you want to, and not towards Alex, and then people want to fucking bitch about it. Mm-hmm. Oh, don't bitch. I mean, and say, well, I did my best. Well, you pissed off a bunch of people. You were right. I mean, look at your approach. Look who you're influencing. Start at home. Forget about everywhere. Just start at home. Do your children and grandchildren hold the same ideals that you do, and are they effective in defending them? Then go to your school board. Then do city council and county commissioner. Then go to your state reps. Then go to your state senators. Then work on your congressman. Then work out. And don't be afraid. And look, and be comfortable being uncomfortable. Look, I'm voting for Trump. I voted for him last time. I used to run under the Democrat platform. I think the Democrat Party really lost its way. Not all Democrats, but the platform. And so that's why I vote Republican. I'm not a Republican. I vote Republican. I'm a Christian. I'm a child of God. I'm an American. I'm a husband. I'm a daddy. And I happen to practice law. That's what they vote Republican. I mean, that's not my identity. That's what I vote because my identity is in Christ. My identity is who I am as a duty as a husband first, as a daddy second, and then as a friend and everything else that I do. And then of course I happen to practice law. That's what I do. That's not who I am. That's why I didn't freak out when I left office. Is that all these people, they get these positions, they get these titles, and they lose their shit when they're stripped from them, because that's their identity. I was not the DA. I served as the DA. I didn't lose a beat. And if anyone that knows me personally, George walked through with me, Saulo knew me. I mean, I didn't lose a beat. I mean, of course, I was in fights because they were commanding. I was defending myself, and God vindicated. He's so righteous. He's so good, and I trust him. That's why I'm never too tired to talk about him. But I didn't lose my identity. I didn't lose myself.
I know.
Because that's not who I was. So all that to say is, I guess, long answer for Alex's comment, it's not over yet. I mean, I believe people will ultimately be held accountable, right? But even until then, I mean, this fight is still, we're in it right now, and it's shifting, and we need to continue to educate ourselves and persuade people to think and ultimately vote differently.
I love that. But it's a long answer, but it's a great answer, and it's an important reminder that we need to be students of history. The more you study history, the more you have a long view of history, and you realize, to your point, it's a great point. How many people would argue that Joe Biden, in some significant sense, isn't being held accountable right now? But this is part of our problem. We don't live very long. And now with the fact that God really has been extricated from society, at least from the societal consciousness, we have such a short view of history. It's always about the here and now, instant gratification. I mean, this drive-through mentality suffuses our very thinking, and so we don't think about that. Like, if you got to wait a week, God forbid, that's a lifetime. Yeah. I mean, 5 seconds, and it comes down to these damn screens, doesn't it? I mean, you send a text, if you're not getting a response back in 2 seconds, you get impatient with the person. You think something's wrong with them or you.
Yes,
it's nuts. It's like, why am I not getting an?
Like, when I don't respond to Salo, he gets all pissed off, and he's like,
"What the hell's wrong with you?"
Comes to my house, Nico. Why aren't you answering my phone? Hey, asshole, get out of here!
And then they give you tools. And the problem is they've given you tools to be dishonest about that. Like, they give you these little icons, like a question mark. Like, you don't want to write the question back again to get an answer, so they give you a shortcut so you don't seem like such a dick. So they give you a little question mark, so you can put the question mark on the same one to say, "Hey, dumbass, what? This is not a hard question. How come it's taking you a whole 34 seconds to get back to me?" So we have a very short view of reality to begin with, which doesn't help. But our founders didn't have any such. See, they were thinkers. They were political thinkers. They were students of history. Yeah. And they knew that there are consequences. You get to pick your choices. You don't get to pick your consequences. That's right. And eventually the chickens come home to roost. And they knew that. And they looked at all the possible philosophical systems and the options before them. They were plenty familiar with Islam, plenty familiar with Eastern monistic religions of Hinduism, and they were plenty familiar with Buddhism. They knew all of the options, and they knew Christianity. And they thought, at the end of the day, Nico, in the final analysis, which set of principles best guarantees our best chance of being able to actually solve problems in a way that doesn't lead to complete decimation of one another? What is that? And it came down to what? The principles of the Ten Commandments and the Sermon on the Mount, which I would argue are exactly the same formula to different generations. God didn't change, but how he approached individuals in time changed. And that's why you basically have a slight difference. Jesus was talking to a different generation. And what he was doing is it's beautiful. Read the Ten Commandments, the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5:3 to 7:27. Read them and watch Jesus artfully, masterfully, beautifully, capably explain 1,500 years of moral principles and a legislative portfolio in terms that a new generation could understand. It wasn't just about what do we do, but Nico, how do I do it? Amen. And then he went about modeling it in a short 3 years. The founders were infinitely aware of that. And they thought to themselves, how in the world do we encapsulate that, Nico? And they did it in a declaration. So when people say, excuse me, let me just finish talking, shut up. I realize it's turning into a sermon. Nope. when people say, how come the Constitution isn't overt with terms of God, with God terms or Jesus terms or biblical terms? The answer is that the Constitution is a how-to document. And the Declaration of Independence is a why document. The Declaration of Independence is a philosophical document. That's where you find the references to God.
That's right. Say that again. The Constitution is a what?
The Constitution is a how-to document.
That's right.
And the Declaration is a why document. Really a what and a why document. It talks about the philosophy. Why? It talks about God and human beings. It talks about injustices, right? And so they didn't need to restate all of that in the Constitution because it's understood. What they did in the Constitution is they went through really the legalities, the now how shall we live aspect. Now that we believe that there is a God and that we are accountable to him, how shall we live, Nico, towards one another, right? And so the founders encapsulated these truths in our core documents. And that's why I love that America continues to wrestle with this, because Nico, that's what's in our DNA. Not what Barack Obama says it's in, when he said in June 15th of 2008, I think he said racism is in our DNA when he was, don't even want to get into that right here. But the founders would argue with that. They would argue with that. It's a sense that God exists, that we are accountable to him. It's entrenched in our documents, in our legal documents. It defines who we are. We have strayed from that, Nico. True enough. The founders were sinners. The Bible would call them sinners.
Yes.
They were all, most of them, many of them, I should say, Orthodox Christians. All of them were in some serious sense influenced by biblical ethics. But the founders were sinners. Some of them had open infidelities. Yes, some of them, few of them owned slaves. True enough. All of them divested of those slaves. No question about it. They were sinners. But at the end of the day, they said, what is our best hope? And they came back to biblical principles and they enshrined that conviction in our founding documents. That's inarguable.
Well, great sermon. I love it. I couldn't take notes, but it was great. But George Washington, I guess we'll end on this, Karen. George Washington said it's impossible to govern a nation without God in the Bible. George Washington. If you listen to his speech, his speech before he left office, it reads as a sermon, number one. Andrew Jackson says the Bible is the rock on which our republic rests. This was not a question. When I go through my little rants, when I do these, I have a whole list of quotes from our founding fathers, because it gets to their mindset. Where were they at the time? President Bukele from El Salvador, he says, look, how did you do this? How did you accomplish? We prayed. Did you see that interview with Tucker? It was a great interview. I love his demeanor. He's strong. He's tough. He goes, we prayed. We got together because you pray openly. We prayed. Why wouldn't we pray? Who doesn't think this is not a spiritual battle? Just because we just prayed. We prayed for wisdom, which we're called to. James 1:5 says, if any man lacks wisdom, pray and it will be given to you abundantly. Proverbs says that wisdom is found in the counsel of what? Many, not one. So if you think you have all the answers, you're the asshole that's the problem, right? It's no, you're maybe part of the solution, but you need wisdom from other people. And so we got to get back to that. So I love that President, and look, and his country is blessed because of it. Mm-hmm. We have a principled man. Of course, I'm always careful that we don't overcorrect, because you trample on some rights when you're trying to correct. And George has brought up the whole, benevolent dictator concept, which is fair. I hope we never have to get to that point, because in the process, you're going to be trampling on people's rights to do what's good, but then you hope that the person stays good that's in power. So it's always a fine line. But Bukele, I think, is a model for people. Re-elected by over 85% of the vote. His people are flourishing. They're happy. They're safe. It went from the murder capital of the world to one of the safest countries in his region. And so, God bless him, and hope he continues to bless his people, or the people of his country. Same thing with what's his name, Milei or whatever. He's doing wonderful work in Argentina. So look, I'm not comparing Trump to these people, but I'm saying I think the people in general worldwide are looking for a different type of leader.
And that it can be turned around.
It can be turned around. Look, we need Trump for another 4 years.
There's hope.
I just don't buy into the whole delusion. I don't. We'll criticize him when it's appropriate. We'll pray for him because we're supposed to. I pray for Joe Biden now, believe it or not. And it's not that he drops dead. No, I pray. I literally pray for a course correction. It can happen. It happened in Nineveh if you study scripture. And so I pray for him. I'm going to pray for Kamala Harris because I'm called to. I pray for our leaders locally. I pray that there's a change in ideas. I change that there's a persuasion in their heart. I pray that their advocacy changes. It can happen. Now, what are you doing to do that? That's my challenge to people. What are you doing? Who are you persuading? Who are you influencing? Are you studying? Are you just living in sound bites and just laughing at people and staying in your little echo chamber and then criticizing people in your underwear, at home? I hope not. I hope you're out there doing good work and not just being, just difficult to be difficult. This is a civil war of ideas. We've been in it for a while, Karen.
No, I can't laugh at Biden anymore. I can't laugh at those situations.
It's sad. It's scary. It's all the things. It's a lot of things. I mean, you don't think that our enemies and adversaries are saying like, God, we better hurry up, man. Either we're gonna interfere to keep this guy in office. Maybe they're gonna interfere to keep him.
Yeah.
He didn't control. I mean, all the lies he made in that Stephanopoulos whatever interview. Look, I can go on forever. I don't want to rant, but I hope that people understand what we celebrated on the 4th of July. I hope that some of the things we talked about makes them think, maybe research, do whatever. And start at home. I mean, start with your kids, your grandchildren, your friends. Have conversations. Educate yourself. Be the, as Salvo likes to do, be the ignorant interviewer and ask people where they come from and why they think the way they think. Don't just turn someone off because they think differently. Can you befriend someone that thinks differently? And just have an open discussion. I have many people that even work in the office with me that think differently. And we have passionate, heated sometimes discussions. There's a deep love for each other. We have a purpose in our profession of what we're trying to do for our clients and defend them. But there's an open door. And they're going to see the way you live your life, and they're going to say, man, this person's persuaded by what they advocate, because look at the consistency, not perfection, consistency in their life. And can you do that? Can you be the gospel that nobody reads? That's what I challenge people. So what do I look at, Salvo? All right, guys, thanks for joining us as always. Hope you had a blessed Independence Day celebration and that you enjoy your family this weekend. God bless you, and hope you see us by joining us next week.